Hello, we're continuing with the laws of Pesach, laws of Passover, and we are on Tuf Ayin Gimel 473 in the middle of Sif Dalet, in the Mishnah Berurah specifically on Yud Ches. So yesterday we talked about what's on the Seder plate. Today we're going to talk in the Mishnah Berurah some of the reasons why we have each thing on the Seder plate. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the Matzahs. We have 3 Matzahs on underneath the Seder plate. So 2 of those matzahs, because we have, just like every yontiv we have, and every Shabbos we have 2 loaves of challah. So on Pesach too, we have 2 matzahs for the same reason, because of the manna. We got an extra portion of manna the day before. So what's the third one for? The third matzah is in order to break it into 2. Why do you break it into 2? And 1/2 we use to fulfill the mitzvah of eating matzah. There's a Torah mitzvah at the night of the Seder to eat matzah, so we fulfill it with the piece of matzah that we break. Now, if you have more than 1 person at a Seder, probably even, it might not be enough for 1 person, but if you have 1 person at a Seder, you're more than 1 person at a Seder, then that little bit of matzah is not going to be enough, because you have to have the proper volume of matzah. So what we do is we take a little bit of the broken matzah and pass it, everybody at the table gets a little piece, and we, for the rest of the volume that's required, we use other matzahs for that. So that's what one part of that matzah is for. The lechem aini, karya rachmana, because the Torah calls it poor man's bread. And an ani, a poor person, eats a little bit, like a little piece. And the second half is used for the afikomen, which will be discussed later in Seif Vav. Okay, that's the 3 matzahs. So we have, why do we have 3 matzahs? We have 2 matzahs like every other yontiv, and we have 1 matzah so that we could break it apart and use half for the mitzvah of matzah and half for the afikomen. Charoses. Now we have charoses. What do we have? Charoses, that's the apple and the cinnamon with the nuts and the wine. So kadei litbol bo es hamara, we dip the maror, the bitter herb, in the charoses. Kidlakamen b'simen taf ayin hey, like we're going to say in simen taf ayin hey. The karpas hu min yarek. Now what's the karpas? The karpas min yarek shekoron oser karpas. There was a type of vegetable called karpas. Ubachu lechatchila b'min zeh shehu notrikun shishim perech. It's an acronym for Shishim Parach Klaimar, which means Shishim Riboy Avdu Avodas Parach, which means 600,000 did backbreaking labor, referring to the 600,000 Jews that were taken out of Egypt. So it's an acronym for that. And most people that I'm aware of use celery. Other people use other things. But we're going to see, even though the custom is to use different, some people might have the custom to use different vegetables. For the karpas, there's going to be a common denominator, as the Mishnah Berurah is going to tell us now. Or yarek acher me'ezeh min shehu, where he says you don't have to use karpas, this vegetable called karpas. You could use another type of vegetable, ach lechatchila, but the preferred practice, tov sheyikach me'oso hamin shemevarchan alav oso bracha shemevarchan alamar kedei sheyiftor b'zeh mar she'ochel b'toch hasuda. What we want to do, even though the Shulchan Aruch says you can pick any vegetable, you want to pick a vegetable that has the same blessing as the maror. The reason is because when we make the blessing on the karpas, we have in mind to exempt the maror which we're going to have in the middle of the meal. So we make a bori pri hadama on the karpas, and we have in mind that this bori pri hadama is also going to cover the maror, so we don't have to make one later. However, what you should not do is you should not take a vegetable that is one of the 5 types of mar. Why? Ki acher shemila kreso mimar ech yivarach acher kach alachilas mar. By the common simtafa and hefsebes. How can we later in the Seder we're going to eat mar, and we're going to make a blessing of Hashem commanding us to eat mar, right? So he says, if you want, how could you use a karpas? How could you use mar for karpas, and you've been filling your stomach with mar the whole night, and then you get to the mar part of the Seder and you make a bracha of who commanded us to eat mar? That's very weird. So what you should do is, we use celery. I think most people use celery. And you should use, first, lechatchila, a vegetable that has the same bracha as the mar, bori pri hadama, And you should also you should make sure not to use one a vegetable which is one of the 5 types of maror. Okay, let's do one more stiff cut in here. Melach, we said you're supposed to have salt water. Litbul behema karpas vayarek. You dip the karpas, the vegetable, in the salt water. Im chal b'Shabbos. Now, if it falls out on Shabbos, yaseh melach kodem Shabbos. You should make the salt water before Shabbos. V'yaseh b'Shabbos. You shouldn't make salt water on Shabbos. This is a hilchas. That's a hilchas Shabbos issue. Why you're not allowed to make salt water, a lot of salt water on Shabbos. So you should really, if the Seder is falling out on Shabbos, which this year it is, you should make the salt water beforehand. Now, let's say you didn't do it before Shabbos, and you don't have any vinegar to dip. Like it says in Hilchos Shabbos, you should make a little bit of salt water, a very little bit. That's a Hilchos Shabbos issue. Now, this thing that we dip the karpas into the salt water is actually an enactment of the sages. Now, why? The reason is to make the children wonder what's going on. We dip the vegetables in this salt water before the meal so that the kids should ask, hey, what are you doing? We never dip vegetables before our meal in salt water. This is very weird because we want the kids to ask questions at the Seder. And because why? The mitzvah, there's a mitzvah, we mentioned the Torah mitzvah to eat matzah at the Seder. There's also a Torah mitzvah to tell the story of the leaving of Egypt. And the way that mitzvah is done, of telling the story of leaving of Egypt, is through question and answer. We want the children to ask questions, and we answer the questions. And he cites verses proving this. That's why we have the 4 questions at the beginning of the Seder. And then the head of the Seder, the father answers, Avadim hayinu, we were slaves in Egypt. So this is another way to get the kids to ask questions by dipping the karpas in the salt water. Okay? And we'll continue more next time with the other parts of the Seder, what they signify. Wishing everyone a beautiful day.